episode of Three Deep South. We are a week away from college football, so this week we're going over the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And next week will be our official 8-0 prediction show. Apparently my Wi-Fi is wagging out, but it's working now. So yeah, this will be our last conference prediction show. We're going over the Big Ten today. We're going to kind of go through who we think's going to win, maybe where the playoff cutoff is on these teams. Go over some schedules. I'll let Justin kind of start. How was your week, man?
Man, I think the closer we get to the end of August, I think it's like, it doesn't matter if it's hot outside. It doesn't matter if it's storming. I mean, it doesn't matter if I catch a flat tire on the work truck and it postponed my day an extra 2 hours or whatever. I just like, okay, we're 10 days away, 14 days away. How many ever days away we are? Right now we're 8 days away. I count week 0 as the start of college football. I mean, some people don't. I know it's not as like a big of a game as like, your Texas and, your Ohio State and stuff like that. You don't have any big games, but to the college football degenerate people, I mean, you have a big game week 0. So I count week 0 as my week 1. That's when college football starts. So, I mean, honestly, man, I don't care what goes on during the week. I'm just ready for next Saturday.
Me too, man. I'm a believer in week 1 being week 1. I think we should just start it early if we're going to do it. But either way, I am excited for Kansas State, Iowa State, in Dublin, Farmageddon.
For sure.
But we're getting there. We're getting there. I'm just excited to have any kind of real football, not preseason NFL. Let's kind of get into our Big Ten predictions. Last year, this was a conference that fielded, what was it, 3 playoff teams, 3 or 4?
4. Yeah,
Ohio
Oregon,
State, Indiana, yep. Oregon,
and Penn State.
And Penn State, that's right.
Yeah.
This is a conference that'll probably be around that number again. So, if your teams can win some, you got a lot of out of conference big games in this, early slate for them. If they can win a couple of those, you could see another 4-team playoff year kind of for the Big Ten. Who do you have winning the conference, Justin?
I mean, going off what you said at the beginning, I know, if you've been watching with us for the last 2 or 3 months, we've talked about how they've talked about extending the playoff and how they talked about setting it up different. I feel like until they change and give us like a specific rule, I feel like both the Big Ten and the SEC are going to kind of fluctuate around that 4 to 5 teams getting in a playoff range. I mean, and I know this is kind of off topic, but it's kind of on topic with college football. I know you hate him, so we can probably trash on him a little, but Eli Drinkwitz went on a podcast and was talking about how like they need to do this and that. And he kind of just beat around the bush on a lot of topics. But for all these teams that went, like your Illinois that missed, that went 10-3, or they went 9-3 technically without the bowl game, and your Minnesotas and your Iowas and all those teams that lost in November to not get in the playoff. Like now in this day and age in college football, like SEC, Big Ten, like those are the main 2 big fighters. But like your November is your playoff. That's when playoffs start. Because if you win or lose a game, that could either put you in the playoff or not in the playoff. But after all that, I would think it would be a disservice for me to not think Ohio State was going to win it all. I hate that because I'm kind of one of those people that like, I don't like jinxing myself, but the only team that I would say that could be number 1 over Ohio State, just because they have a lot of momentum coming into the season. They're returning a lot. They're one of the only teams in the Big Ten that is returning a starting quarterback that is in that upper echelon. Illinois is returning their starting quarterback, but Penn State's different. I just don't trust James Franklin. We've talked about that before too. Like, it's just something about James Franklin. I just don't trust it. And a lot of people think that, like, now Ohio State's not returning like a bunch of production like they were last year. Don't get me wrong. Like, they're losing a lot. They sent the most amount of players to the NFL draft that they have in program history. They had 4 first-rounders. But I think what helps Ohio State a lot is they got a lot of players in late parts of the game because they became a new team going to the playoffs. So a lot of your backup players got to play against Oregon in the playoffs when it was 41-21, or they got to play against Tennessee late in the game when they were, up 35-10 or something like that. So they might not be considered as returning starters, but like if you go down, on returning production, Ohio State's bottom of the conference at 48%, but they have start reps, which is 124% or 124 reps. Well, that's like 2 or 3 spots behind. They would be moving up, is what I'm getting at. So, yes, they're not returning a bunch of starters, but I think that playoff run is going to boost them up to a point to where like they got a lot of people that weren't quote unquote starters in meaningful games that like you can't recreate that atmosphere. It doesn't matter if they got in last year late in the game against Akron or Bowling Green or whatever. You can't recreate that atmosphere. For one. For two, I think Ohio State has the chance to repeat again. I'm not just saying that because they're my team, but like really they're one of the most talent-rich teams in not just the conference but in the nation. And all they're really depending on is Julian Sayin. Now, can Julian Sayin be that? I don't know. I know we're coming out of – we don't know who the quarterback is yet. From what I've heard from – what did I say last week, Mason? My inside sources. What I've heard is they know who the starting quarterback is. They just haven't named it because you don't want Lincoln Keenholz, which would technically be our backup. You don't want him to lose interest this early going into spring practice. So I really like them. I mean, you have to almost rank them pretty high when you have, the top 10 in the top 10 players. You have 1 and 2, and they're both on opposite sides of the ball. With just Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith, those are two. They're gonna be household names by the end of the season if they already aren't. We got 2 new coordinators. I think that's a big jump. I'm more worried about our offensive coordinator, which is Brian Hartline, than I am our defensive coordinator, which is Matt Patricia. I think Matt Patricia is kind of like a plug and play defensive coordinator. You can put him in anywhere in the nation, college, NFL, whatever, and he's going to get you a good defensive product. I think he's good for the defense that we have. With that being said, they do have some tough games. They start out with Texas. It is a home game. I think the game that I would circle the most, that I'm most worried about, obviously we got to play Penn State, but it's at home. And we got to play Michigan, which that doesn't need any hype around it. I feel like, and I'm going to put them in my top 5 too. A lot of people wouldn't. I'm most worried about the Washington game for Ohio State. It's a road game. It could be a night game. They could both be undefeated. That's the game that I'm kind of worried about that, I could see us losing that game. But, if we're talking about parity in the conference, you might be able to lose 1 to 2 games this year and still make it to the conference championship game. And that's kind of across the board with any conference because we've talked about
it. And my rankings, okay, so you're not going to like my rankings just because I don't have Ohio State. I don't even have Ohio State making the conference championship. I think they slip up a little bit, but I don't think it's because Ohio State's bad. I think there is a lot of parity, especially at the top of this conference.
For sure.
Kind of like it is in the SEC. I think you could have your pick of about 3 teams. Now, the second team I have, so I have Penn State winning it. I have Drew Aller leading the Nittany Lions to I think they have a very workable schedule, honestly. They don't play a big non-conference game. They play Oregon at home early at 6:30. That's going to be your whiteout. And then the rest of their games outside of Ohio State they'll all be favored, is how I'm going to say it. They could slip up to an Indiana, I guess. I don't think Indiana is going to beat them. They could slip up to Nebraska, but I think outside of Ohio State, every game on their schedule is winnable. I think Ohio State plays just a rougher schedule. I like the starting running backs that are coming, or the 2 running backs that are coming back. I like Drew Aller. I like who they brought in on the receiving core. The guy from Syracuse, I can't remember his name. But more importantly, I just think it's finally their year. And I don't think that they're going to beat Ohio State. I just don't think that it's something that is possible for them until they prove it, kind of deal. But
Yeah.
I think they have the easiest schedule of all these top teams in the conference. Number 2, I have Michigan, which is going to be surprising. Michigan's returning a lot all across the board, and last year they won 8 games, beat Alabama with no quarterback. Essentially, Alex Orji was inept. Like he just was not good. Regardless of who they start, I feel like they're going to have a really good year, and they kind of have a workable schedule in conference too. Let me pull it up real quick. I was looking at it earlier, and that's kind of why I brought them up. Well, if my computer will work. So they play Nebraska early without their head coach. I think that's a game that they could slip up. They go to USC. They kind of blew that one last year. And then outside of that, they have Ohio State. So
Yeah.
if they split that Nebraska USC and then beat Ohio State, I could see them being right in the conference championship, and it would not be surprising to me. I do have Ohio State finishing third, just because I think Ohio State's schedule isn't great really.
No.
Like you said, they go on the road to Washington early. They host Penn State. They play Michigan. I even think a team like Wisconsin on the road could be tough. It's right before that Penn State, or it's a bye week actually. It's right before their bye week. And they might be banged up because they go to Illinois. They go or wait. In this early stretch here, they host Texas, to Washington, they go to Illinois, they go to Wisconsin. Like that first stretch is probably one of the tougher first couple stretches in this conference.
It sounds like a pretty tough slate of games, doesn't it, Mason?
Well, for a big conference, really I just think that Ohio State's schedule doesn't really. It's kind of like it was last year. Like they just have games that could slip them up, and it's not that they're not a playoff team. I could still see them making the playoffs, even if they only win 9 regular season games. I just think that of the top echelon right there, I think they have the toughest of the schedules. And with a running back room that you got a lot of unproven guys, a quarterback that's unproven. I like your defense a lot, but you are having to replace people.
Yeah.
I just think it's something that early on Ohio State could slip up and find themselves outside of that top 2 again.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Like, I remember it because I'm a fan. I watch it all the time. I watched every game. But Ohio State did finish 4th last year.
Mm-hmm.
They went 7-2 in conference, and they still made the national championship. And that's what you're going to kind of see. It's no more of this like, oh, well, if they didn't finish 1 or 2, they're out. They're going to the Rose Bowl. I'm kind of with you. I mean, I would say our top 3 are probably all the same, except for I have them in a different order. I have Penn State at 2, and as much as I hate to say it, Michigan is going to be really good this year. They're going to scare the shit out of me, honestly. I mean, the thing is what a lot of people don't understand, and I mean, me and you have discussed it a lot, just because you're a Arkansas kind of / SEC fan, and I'm an Ohio State Big Ten fan. Like I usually don't go back and forth with bowl games. I don't like it because most everybody leaves, and there's really no way to tell. The only reason I bring up the Michigan game against Alabama is because Alabama pretty much had all their starters, Jalen Milroe, all of them. Alabama, all their starters had already left. Their Will Johnson and Michigan. Sorry. Michigan starters had already left, so it's a very good benchmark to see how good Michigan's defense is going to be this year. So I go off that one, and then I go off to Illinois, South Carolina, just because they were both 2 young teams that kind of competed against each other. I think Michigan is going to be really good, honestly. I think their defense is going to be hard to even move the ball on. I know they're dealing with a lot of stuff, and it's supposed to come out today. I haven't heard anything about it. I'm kind of over it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it. I'm just ready to move on. I've been hearing it and talking about it for like 2 years. Do I think it's bullcrap that they're not getting in trouble? Yeah, but I'm not going to waste my time on it. And with a team last year that is returning a lot of production this year, they threw for, I think, 60 yards against Ohio State and still beat them. I mean, they have 65% of their returning production coming back. That's 24th. They have 65 on defense and 64 on offense, and they have a quarterback that was ranked number one coming out of high school. That would be my third. My second would be Penn State. I think they're a lot like the Michigan 2 years ago, Ohio State last year, and then you have Penn State this year. As much as I want Ohio State to win this, and I mean, I have all control over clipping things up just as much as you do. So what I'm about to say, I'm not going to let get clipped up. But if Ohio State doesn't win the national championship, I think it would be great for the Big Ten if Penn State won it. I think it would kind of elevate them to that point to where, hey, we've had three different teams win it in the last 3 years. I think it would be great. Now, do I want them to win it? Heck no. I'd love Ohio State to win it. But I think Penn State is kind of following that resume of the last two teams. You know, you can call them the big brother of the conference because Penn State's always been in that top three, but they've always been three. But they're returning enough production. They're returning 65%, just like Michigan, 25. They have 76% on offense and 53 on defense. My biggest concern with Penn State is not so much their schedule. Like you said, they have a pretty easy schedule. It's Jim Knowles. And I know he came from Ohio State, and he was great at Ohio State. But if you remember, they had issues. They had growing pains, especially in that first year, because Jim Knowles gets real blitz happy. Well, he came in and said, listen, if I just give up 6 plays that are boom or bust plays, then I'll be fine. Well, we gave up 6 plays against Michigan, and we got dogs on them. So I don't know what his mentality is going to be when he goes over there. With that being said, too, Ohio State, when we had Jim Knowles, we had a few games, big games, that we gave up a bunch of points that we relied on our offense to score those points back for us. So I don't know if it's necessarily a plug-and-play system with Jim Knowles going to Penn State. I think it's a perfect defense. I think they have the linebackers that he likes to play with, but I don't know if they're going to win too many games off the back of their defense because their defense was still good last year. How much more do they improve? You know, like Ohio State had the problem of like they would have a top 5 offense, but they would have a 60-something ranked defense. Well, that hasn't been Penn State's problem. Penn State's had a top 10 defense every year. It's just James Franklin ends up choking the games away.
And I think that's interesting. But it's kind of the same thing with like a Kirby or Ryan Day or these guys. Like everyone doubts them until they do it. I think this is finally the year that James Franklin kind of steps up and I don't think I originally thought that Oregon game was going to be kind of a scary one for him, but I think Penn State is significantly better than Oregon. Like
I think Oregon's
gonna. There's a chance that Penn State loses that game early in the season at home, whiteout, NBC. Like I don't think there's a chance they lose that game. So it all comes down to that Ohio State game.
Yeah, and I think Oregon. I don't even have Oregon in my top 5. Honestly, I think Oregon's going to have a big regress this year. They're dealing with a lot of issues. They just kicked, or I guess you could say suspended one of their players off the team. Dan Lanning's kind of going through it. Anyways, I think they're going to be good, but I just think it's going to be a natural regress just because they did win the conference last year. But I could see a season where Michigan loses 3 games. You know what I mean? Right. I mean, we'll get to it later on, but that would be my big 3. It would be Ohio State 1, Penn State 2, Michigan 3.
Who do you have finishing out your top 5? Because we might differ on this.
Yeah, I would say my 4 would be Illinois, and then my 5 would be Washington. I think Illinois is just – they were good last year. I think they just kind of got that they were 9-3. So they were in the same predicament as your South Carolinas. They actually played South Carolina in the bowl game. They were in the same predicament as your South Carolinas, your Alabama's, your stuff like that, where they felt like they were just on the edge of getting in the playoffs. You just didn't hear as much coming from Iowa talking about how it wasn't fair and it's not easy and all this hoopla. And I really think it was good for Illinois to go and win that bowl game against South Carolina. Because like I said earlier, I don't like looking at bowl games because some teams have this and some teams have that, but Like, I don't think Iowa or South Carolina really sent a bunch to the draft last year. They were both kind of the same style team. They were both young. Pretty much everybody knew both quarterbacks were coming back. They had a lot returning, defensive oriented, kind of that same benchmark to where, yeah, it was a bowl game and some people probably opted out, but it was like the best way to see what this year's team was going to be like. And Illinois came out on top in that game. Now, if they played again neutral site this year, do I think that would happen? I don't know, but I feel like it's a good way to tell what it beholds for this season. They're returning a lot. I like Brett Bielema in the Big Ten. They made some noise last year. They kind of just didn't win the games at the end of the season that they were supposed to. I don't actually have their schedule pulled up. Hang on, I can go down here to it. So, I mean, they don't. I wouldn't say that they have like a tough schedule. Obviously, they play Ohio State, but it's at home. That's a big deal to have Ohio State at home, especially Illinois. They could be undefeated going into that game. And watch out, because if those fans have something to root for, it could be one of those things where it's like they haven't had something to root for in a long time, because they play WIU, they play Duke, they play Western Michigan, they go to Indiana, which I think that can be a scary game for them. But I think they're going to come out on top on that game. I just don't think Indiana. I think it was more of a flash in the pan. I could see Indiana finishing like 7th or 8th in the conference, but I don't think it's going to be like it is last year. Another team that could be scary for them would be USC, but it's another game that's at home. And then they play Purdue, and then they play Ohio State, but it's at home. And then other than that, they play Ohio State. Then they got to go to Washington. That's going to be tough. But then they go to Rutgers, to Maryland, or Rutgers at home, Maryland at home, Washington at Washington, and then they have Northwestern at home. So they don't really have that schedule that's just like, oh my gosh, that's a gauntlet. You know what I mean? Like, they play USC. I think they're going to be improved. They play Indiana. That's going to be their hardest two back-to-back games, and then they have a cupcake in Purdue. Then they have Ohio State and Washington. So it's like they have two hard games, an easy game, then two hard games. That's why I have them finishing 4th. I think they're returning a lot. That, like, they could be down against USC in the 4th quarter by 10 points, but they're more senior laden than almost any other team in the conference, or any other team in the conference. So I could see them really standing up and kind of showing their colors, kind of like Ohio State was last year, kind of like Penn State is this year. They just have so much senior leadership. I just don't see them falling to a team that they shouldn't.
My reservation about Illinois is last year they lost a game at home to Minnesota late in the year, where they probably are in the playoff. And another reservation I have is, as an Arkansas fan, we watched Brett Bielema every week. And Brett Bielema, in the SEC at least, at Arkansas, he had a team kind of similar to this one, that he had been here for 3 or 4 years. He had a bunch of guys returning, and he came out and disappointed. And so with what I've seen from him, with my personal experience, it's hard for me to really put him on a pedestal like that. I actually have Illinois finishing 7th behind USC at 4, Nebraska at 5, and Oregon at 6. I think that he's gonna not necessarily lose some games he shouldn't, but I just don't think Illinois is gonna win the games that are 50-50s. Like, I don't see them going to Indiana and winning. They could, I guess, but I have my reservations about that. I don't know if they'll beat USC at home. I don't see them having a chance against Ohio State. And then right after that Ohio State game, they have a bye week, and then they, right out of that bye week, go on the road to Washington. I just think that's 4 very losable games. And if you slip up in a game against like a Minnesota again, you're looking at 5 conference losses potentially. So I just have reservations about them. But you are right; they are very senior laden. They could flip those 50-50 games. And just from a perspective of losable games, I think they have a lot more than some other teams. But yeah, speaking of like my 4, which is USC, I like Lincoln Riley's team. I like how they've really had a focus on the high school recruiting ranks since Caleb Williams left. I think his defense is finally going to be improved. Now, I don't think it's going to be a top 25 defense, but I think it's going to be good enough with his offense to win some games. I think last year they had 5 Big 10 games that they were leading in that they lost. I know they lost their quarterback, but I just don't see a world where they are leading in 5 games again and lose. They don't really have the craziest non-conference or the craziest conference schedule. They don't play Ohio State. They don't play Penn State. They do play Michigan at home though in October. They do go to Illinois. Middle of the year they go to Notre Dame, which could be tough, and they go to Nebraska. And I think that Nebraska game is kind of a 50-50 game. I have Nebraska finishing right under them, but it's kind of a flip-flop situation. I feel like if Nebraska wins that game, Nebraska could be fourth, maybe potentially looking at a playoff spot if 4 teams from the Big Ten get in again. I just think it kind of depends on what happens there. But talking about Nebraska, I like Matt Rule a lot. I like Matt Rule at Baylor. It obviously didn't work out in the NFL, but I like Dylan Raiola. They're returning their running back. They're returning a lot of pieces. They brought in a bunch of transfer pieces. I don't have their schedule pulled up. Let me do that real quick, and I can kind of tell you where their bugaboos are. Sorry, I'm not doing well with technology today. I think their toughest games are they do host Michigan, who I did say I thought was going to make the conference championship, but Sharon Moore will not be there. It's week 4, and it's at home, and Nebraska goes crazy. Then they have who I have finishing at the bottom of the conference. They have Michigan State, they have Maryland on the road, they go to Minnesota, and they host Northwestern. 4 games in a row. And if you have to have road games in any of these major conferences, you want them to be road games like Maryland. You want them to be road games like Minnesota does get wild, and that is going to be a night game. But you want to go to Minnesota. You want to go to Maryland. You don't want to go to Penn State, which they do later in the year. You don't want to go to Iowa. You don't want to go to Ohio State. They get Iowa at home. They get USC at home. Their toughest game of the conference schedule is going to be Penn State. Now, this is still a young quarterback. This is still a youngish team. This is still early in the Matt Rule era, 3 years in. So I do think that they're going to slip up somewhere where they shouldn't. But I think Nebraska is going to be vastly improved from what you saw last year. And I think they were vastly improved from the year before. I just think this is a steady progression type of deal with them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's kind of where and I think it's kind of like we're beating the same old drum. It seems like every week we talk about this. It just depends on how many teams you have there at the top. I feel like the Big Ten is another one of those conferences where we both agree on the top 3, but after the top 3, from about 4 to probably about 8, you don't know who's going to be in there. I'm really high on Washington. I like USC too and Nebraska, but the reason I like Washington is because of their quarterback.
Right.
Damon Williams, he came in last year. He played against USC. I wouldn't even consider it a play against USC. Threw 1 pass. Then he played against Penn State. He went 6 for 10 for 60 yards, not anything crazy. And then he played against you, but then the last 2 games is what you really have to look at. He played against Oregon, which was the number 1 team in the nation. He went 17 for 20 for 200 yards and a touchdown. That's a 73% completion percentage. And then in the bowl game, they did lose by 1 point, but he went 26 for 32 for 374 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. That's an 85% completion rate. Their defense is very good. They're returning a lot of production on defense. They are returning some production on offense. I really like him as a quarterback. I like what they're doing out there at Washington. You got to remember, last year was the first year that they didn't have Kalen DeBoer, and they still went to a bowl game. They still had a winning season. They did lose their bowl game, but it was about 1 point. It wasn't like it was anything crazy. So I like what they're doing out there. I think who's their head? Isn't it Ed Fish?
Something like
that. Yeah, I think it's Ed Fish. But I think he's doing the right things. They went 6-7 last year, 4-5 in the conference. Um, it's just something about them that kind of makes me think that they're going to finish higher than your USC's, your Nebraskas, and stuff like that. But kind of like what you were saying, I would say going through the list, obviously um, you have Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. I would say those are the three that are up top. I'm not as high on Oregon, but then when you throw out these names, Oregon, Illinois, Indiana's, Iowa, USC, Nebraska, Washington, I mean, which one of those teams could you see for sure beating the others? I don't think there is one, personally. I mean, I like Nebraska. I like everything about certain teams in this conference. Another team that a lot of people aren't looking out at, watch out for UCLA this year. I'm not saying that they're going to finish like top 4 in the conference, but if you go back and look and see what they did last year, they won 4 of their last 6 games. It seemed like they were really turning some things around. They brought in certain pieces in the NIL. Yes, they brought in Nico Uyanga, whatever his name is, however you say it. Yeah, exactly. Lilo and Stitch. They brought him in, and do I like him as a quarterback? No. But was he a 5-star all everything that went to Tennessee that showed great improvement and the possibility to be somebody crazy, kind of like a DJ Lagway? For sure. Now imagine him going out to UCLA where maybe he got his stuff together. Maybe the coach told him, listen, man, you're not bigger than the team. Because if a lot of people don't remember, he said he left Tennessee because he wanted $4 million. Well, nobody offered him that, so he kind of had to take less money to go there, which makes me think maybe he shows up to work. Hopefully, I think it would be good for kind of like any conference. I think it would be good for that bottom tier, the Big Ten, to improve and to take that next step. Because that's what's always been the problem, and that's what's always caused the argument between the SEC and the Big Ten. Is like, our top of conference was, I mean, equal. You could take this team and put them up against that team, and sometimes the Big Ten is going to win, sometimes the SEC is going to win. It's that middle to lower tier where you're like, dang, like we don't really stand a chance. And I feel like we're growing to that. It's just that bottom tier really needs to step up and make their self relevant in the conference.
Well, and I just think it's a situation where Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State have been so dominant for so long and stepped on the bottom of this conference that they're kind of doing what would happen with Nick Saban, right? So Nick Saban was winning all this stuff, and everyone was trying to catch Alabama. Well, the SEC fired more coaches than anyone. I mean, they fired everybody. Everyone that coached in the SEC. If you didn't win, a bunch of games, 2 years you were gone. And I just think also to a certain extent, you have these situations where Iowa, Northwestern, they hold on to these coaches that are just mediocre.
Yeah.
And like Northwestern just fired their coach a year ago. Kirk Ferentz is getting old enough that surely he's going to retire sooner or later. It's hard to look at the middle of this conference and look at a team like Iowa and be like, you have won 7 to 8 games for 20 years, and then be like, oh, well, they could progress. Like they could get better. Because like there's no belief in me that Iowa's going to win more than 8 games. There's none.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's what's kind of laden the fucking Big Ten for so long is like, yeah, we're not as talent rich, but like they kind of pride themselves on the development of players. It's just that middle tier. And I think they're coming on. 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was literally Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. That was the only 3. But now you're starting to see your Indianas come on. Yeah, was it for 1 year? Sure, but I mean they are coming on. Your Illinois is coming on. Your USC, which they're new to the conference, but like you do have some teams that are coming on and like growing as a program. Nebraska is a big one. I feel like that could be good, and I feel like that's where NIL kind of changes some things. I'm really excited about the Big Ten this year. I think there's some teams that can make some noise that people aren't expecting. the more I look at it and the more I just look at all the conferences as a whole and like look at schedules and what it is going to be like for different teams that play hard schedules, but certain teams don't, it feels more and more really similar to 2007.
Right.
Like, I mean, I know I keep saying that, but it seems like every time I break down conferences, um, it just feels like 2007. And I know for people that are fans of like top teams like Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama, like you don't want to hear that. But for people like Arkansas fans, look into 2007. It might be something that you thoroughly enjoy when every week the top dog's getting knocked off. Because I just feel like these conferences, the Big Ten is probably the one that has benefited the most. I would say because it was always there. It's just now it's legal to pay players, so we're doing it like everybody else has been doing it. But I just I just feel like we are benefiting from the NIL and from the transfer portal more than most conferences are. And that can be looked at over the last 2 years, how there has been two Big Ten championship national champions. And 2 years ago, when you had Michigan versus Washington, that was two Big Ten teams in the national championship. I know they weren't here yet, but if it was Texas versus Georgia, y'all would be claiming two SEC teams. Yeah, you would. You might not have been, Mason. You might not have been, but you know people that would be.
Well, I just think it's a situation where in the SEC, for example, Georgia still has the top level of players like on their starting lineup. They don't have the twos and threes. Those twos and threes went to Nebraska, Arkansas, Kentucky, Iowa State. So it's raised the level of competition everywhere, but it's also lowered the elite like level of teams. So I think you see it more in a sense of like a Tennessee beating Alabama twice now, Arkansas beating Tennessee, Missouri had Georgia on the ropes 2 years ago. Like Ohio State, they haven't felt that as much because they still have a lot of that elite, top two, like their two levels are better than everyone else in the Big Tens, besides Penn State, Michigan, obviously, and Oregon. I do kind of want to talk about Oregon real quick. I think it's a situation this year where all of their marbles were on last year. Like
For sure.
they brought in the transfer quarterback, they brought in the transfer wide receiver, and what's that guy's name? Evan Stewart, maybe might be his name.
Yeah, which he's hurt. He's out now. But yes, you're right. I mean, they brought them all in last year.
Like they put everything they could into last year, and it was a good ride until you got into the playoffs and Ohio State just had a vengeance against you. So I don't think it's necessarily a Dan Lanning can't coach or Oregon's bad. I think they're going to have natural regression because their quarterback is young, and this is the first year that Dan Lanning really hasn't had that transfer quarterback coming in that has a whole ton of experience. Like you said, their best wide receiver is going to be hurt. They lost some offensive line pieces. They kicked some guys off the team earlier this week. Maybe it was today. I can't remember. I just saw that.
It was early. It was earlier this week, yeah.
And I just think it's a situation where kind of like it's going to be for Tennessee, where you are just going to take a step back, and it's not that you can't replicate what happened last year for your team. It's just going to be a situation where it's going to be a lot harder to do because you're losing a lot, and you just got a lot of exterior things going on. I think this is an Oregon team that could be really, really good in 2 years if they can hold on to everything. And Oregon's kind of been on the doorstep of winning a national championship for a long time. I don't think they even get a shot this year. I think they're going to lose multiple games in the regular season. I don't think they're going to be in the playoff. I actually have Oregon finishing. I'm finishing sixth. I don't even.
Yeah, that's about where I have them. But I mean, and I think there's going to be natural regression just because they went 13-0 last year, and everybody kind of knew after Ohio State did what they did to Tennessee, that the Oregon game versus Ohio State was going to be like, oh, this is like 1 versus 2. But Ohio State just changed and was a different team. And you always talk about it. Like, if you tell me Ohio State plays a team at the beginning of the season and then are going to play them at the end of the season for playoffs, I'll take the loss at the beginning of the season all day long. If we lose to Texas at the beginning of the season and then go out and play them in the national championship, I would feel more comfortable in the national championship if we lost that first game. If it's a respectable loss, kind of like it was against Oregon. I know, but I'm kind of with you. I don't feel like – I feel like Washington's going to be better than them. I feel like Illinois is going to be better than them. I feel like they're still going to be a good team, but I think they're too young, and it's just one of those growing pain kind of seasons. And I feel like it's just natural regression, but I don't feel like it's going to be a natural regression that their fans would be satisfied with or feel okay with, if that makes sense.
And I do think they kind of have a high ceiling though, because it is still Oregon. They do have a lot of
Yeah.
talent. So like they could still win 10 games and totally make me put my foot in my mouth, but I just don't have confidence in that team right now.
Well, the thing is like they could go 9-3 or 8-4 and be a really good team, but they're in such a tough conference that they could lose that many games and still finish in 7th and 8th, in that area. And because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you side with the SEC or you think the Big Ten's better or what you view. Like, we both know that those are the best two conferences. And the 4th, 5th, and 6th place team could probably go out and beat the 2nd, 3rd, 4th place team in the ACC or the Big 12, just because those conferences have benefited the most off NIL. They were better before NIL started, and they've worked the system when it comes to the transfer portal.
Like last year, Mississippi State almost beat Arizona State. Like it went to the brink,
Yeah,
So it's
and
more talent.
And Mississippi State lost to Toledo. So it's like that's going to be a fruition of like what this season is going to be like. I feel like and I'm not trying to get off topic. I just kind of feel like we're getting to the end of that show to where we talked about what we wanted to talk about. For all the because I've mentioned, I don't know how many times I've mentioned this, Mason, about 2007. For people that don't know and aren't degenerate college football fans, so this is how 2007 went down. A ranked team lost to a lower ranked team, a ranked team lost to a lower ranked or unranked opponent 62 times during the regular season. A top 10 team lost 29 times in the regular season. The number 1 team lost 4 times. The number 2 team lost 7 times, all in the final 9 weeks of the season. So you think over the last 2 to 3 years that the committee's had a tough time deciding who to put in and who not to put in? I think this season could be the toughest one yet, because I just feel like all the talent is so spread out, and you have so many teams that could upset the top of the conference, and we don't have that dead set what the playoffs is going to be like. Besides, the SEC and the Big Ten are guaranteed to get people in pretty much. But you don't have, every conference championship. I think every conference winner gets in, but they don't get a guaranteed bye. So, like, what happens if Clemson is 9-3 and they win the conference? You know what I mean? Like those
last year, they have to go on the road probably.
Yeah, those are the things that we could run into, and that's why I'm excited about it. I'm just excited for college football parity. I know that probably means it's going to happen to Ohio State, but like I just enjoy college football, and I feel like it would shut a lot of people up when it comes to like, oh, November games don't matter anymore, or like regular season doesn't matter. I feel like this is what we need just to kind of get everybody to shut their mouth about it.
Well, and we can kind of talk about this real quick since we have about 15 minutes to the hour mark. So this is like why I am in such a big support of the automatic qualifier format for the future of college football. That's not the SEC stance. That is actually pretty much everyone else's stance. Or no. That's only the Big Ten stance. Everyone else wants, automatic or no automatic bids. Um, but essentially, what it would do is it would make it in a situation where, like last year in the SEC, you had four teams that were 9-3, 8-4 in that range, but all had two conference losses or three conference losses. Um, but what it would do is in a year like 2007, you would see all of those teams that lost still have a chance to make the playoffs, and
Yeah.
but it would benefit everybody because you would have like Ohio State last year would have had to play an extra game to make it in the playoff, and they would have had to play someone like Oregon or not Oregon. They would have had to play someone like Illinois. You would have given Illinois a chance. You'd give those teams like I didn't think Indiana deserved to be in last year. Indiana would have had to play to make it in, and they would have had to play a tough schedule. You would also give South Carolina a chance. You'd give Ole Miss a chance. You'd give LSU a chance. You'd give all these teams that were kind of on the brink a chance. And I do support the Big Ten's model on that because I think if you don't have automatic qualifiers, it's going to be a situation where, like last year, Ohio State to me didn't have a great resume, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you don't have automatic qualifiers, that doesn't matter anymore because Ohio State's the biggest brand and whatever, and they're going to get in because they're Ohio State. Alabama's
Yeah.
going to get in because they're Alabama. Georgia's going to get in because they're Georgia. And if you have to where just it's all at large, the big brands are going to eat while a South Carolina or an Indiana or an Illinois are going to kind of get put on the back burner. And I hate that that's a conversation that like brands matter, but it does.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think it takes that human element out of it because at the end of the day, everybody knows, yes, the Big Ten has some of the biggest stadiums, but like SEC fans, ESPN, like SEC is ESPN's cash cow. Well, guess who does the conference rankings? Or not the conference rankings, the ratings at the end of the season. I know they say it's a poll or whatever, but like I want to go back to a computer model. But I feel like if you do four teams in the Big Ten and the SEC, and then 2 and 2, and then one at large, I feel like that just makes it equal. Then it truly comes down to win your games and you're in. It doesn't come down to, well, they didn't meet the criteria when it comes to the eye test, or they didn't do this, so Alabama is ranked above Illinois. It's like, no, all you have to do is be top four in your conference at the end of the season, and you're in, regardless. So I feel like that's the best scenario because it takes out all the argument standpoint.
Well, like, and for example, like, let's say we get to the end of this year, and Michigan is 9-2, and Ohio State's 9-2, and they're going into the game. And the model that the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC are all pushing, which it's all because of Greg Sankey. Greg Sankey is like feeding them this crap about you could get as many teams and blah 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 blah. And really, what it is, the SEC wants 8 teams in. But regardless,
Which is ridiculous. I mean, I don't care if you're an SEC fan or not. Like you can't sit here and tell me that you'd rather see Arkansas be in over Michigan. Like it's just not. No, that's not good for
well,
college football.
what it would be more of is instead of an Arkansas being in over a Michigan, it would be Arkansas in over uh, Kansas State. Arkansas would be in over SMU. Arkansas would be in over like in that situation like a 9-3 SEC team would be in over a 10-2, 11-1 ACC Big 12 team is what it's really trying to push. But
Yeah,
if you get to the point where it's all at large and you get to the Iron Bowl, the game, one of those end of the year games, and both teams are 9-2, that game doesn't matter like at all.
no, no,
Like even in the 4-team playoff, you saw two 11-0 teams in the game, or with those big end of the year games, you saw two 11-0 teams go in, and the loser wasn't making the playoff. The loser wasn't making the Big Ten championship. The loser wasn't getting to that spot, and like that game
yeah,
really mattered then. But this year, if they're both 10-2 or 9-2, they're both getting in, and I hate that. I hate that game would not matter in that situation because, like, if you want to protect rivalries and you want to protect conference championships and you want to protect end of the year regular season games, you have to have you have to have games that matter. You have to have consequences. You got to have like everyone on the edge of their seat because Michigan just fumbled in the fourth quarter, or Ohio State's quarterback threw a bad ball and it got batted down on third down. They got to decide on a field goal or not. Like that has to matter. And if you
Yeah.
have automatic qualifiers, like that matters again because you have to finish at a certain point in your conference to even have a chance to make the playoff. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And I think like it's I really hope it doesn't pass, honestly, because I just think the automatic bids, or not the automatic bids, but like when you go that 11-5 route or however they're talking about going, like I just don't. I feel like it brings in too many like human elements, if that makes sense. Because you can't tell me like that it's good for a group of people of 16 or however many are in there get to vote on who they think the 11 best teams are to go to the playoffs. It's like, okay, well, if you have 5 people from the SEC, they can say they're unbiased, but they're going to try to put more SEC teams in because it pays their school. Just like last year, I think the president of the committee that was voting for teams was Michigan's AD. And I know he hates Ohio State, but the more teams they get in, the more money they get as a school, even if their school doesn't make it. And I just feel like it could be really bad, not just for the Big Ten and the SEC. It probably benefit us more than it would benefit the other two conferences. But if we do the 11-5 model, it's going to make it to where we're in 10 years, we're pretty much only going to have two conferences. And all the other people are going to be – that's what it'll turn into. You'll have the North versus the South, or however they won't do North versus South, but they'll do it. They'll name it some kind of weird thing, and all the teams that are not in the North versus South will be like, the secondary schools, and that's where the transfer portal will come into effect. The teams that are not in those Power 2 conferences, the transfer portal will open up, and they'll just start taking kids from the smaller schools, and it'll just be like a kind of like the baseball league is, where you have minor league and major league, where they can just come and take kids whenever they want to. And I don't want it to be like that, because that's just too much like the NFL. I think where we're at now is fine. Let the playoffs be the playoffs for how it is. I didn't have an issue with the 12-team playoff. I had an issue with the seeding, but they already said they were going to fix that. So why not just keep it at the 12-team playoff? Because, like, as much as people want to hate to say it, Ohio State was a Cinderella story last year. I know it doesn't feel like it because it was, Ohio State's the name, but they were an 8th seed that went all the way, buzzsaw through number 1, number 4, number 9, and went all the way to the national championship. Notre Dame was another one, Cinderella story. Like, we had the 2 Cinderella stories in the national championship. So, like, if you want parity in college football, like it was last year, it was just it happened with 2 blue blood programs, so you didn't see it that way.
Well, and I think that's why I was never a fan of the 12-team playoff in general, was because, okay, Notre Dame lost to NIU at home. Why did they make the playoff? You know what I'm saying?
Because
Ohio State lost to Michigan, which at the time was a terrible loss. They lost to Oregon, and they made it as an 8th seed. Now, I do think Ohio State was obviously one of the best teams in the country last year. But in a world where you don't have 12 teams in a playoff, Ohio State's not making the playoff, in that world. Or Notre Dame's not making the playoff. And it's not necessarily an SEC thing that I'm supporting here. It's just that last year, essentially, those games didn't matter. Ohio State losing to Michigan at the end of the year did not affect their season. Like, it sucked. They were pissed off. They were upset. Like, they were throwing a fit for 2 weeks until they played Tennessee. But, like, that game didn't matter. Tennessee losing to Arkansas did not matter at all.
Yeah.
Did not affect their season in any way.
Yeah,
like,
and I
hate that.
I think it's good and it's bad at the same time. Honestly, like, I know what you mean, and I definitely hear you. And this is besides conference. Like, this has nothing to do with Big Ten or SEC. It's just, I get what you're saying. Like, it makes it to where certain games don't matter. Like, your first 2 losses don't matter if you're a good enough program to go to the playoffs. But anything after that, it does matter. So I get what you're saying. I just think it's good to give a team the second shot because I don't know of any other sport, which this is what makes the college football, but I don't know of any other sport where like if you lose one game, you're done for the season, or if you lose two games, you're done for the season. So like I understand it too. I understand what you're saying, but I just feel like it makes it better where it's like it's not one and done. I know some people like the BCS stuff. I didn't personally like it because there was just too much of like, oh well, this conference is harder just because it's harder. It's like, well, why is it harder? Why should they be 1-2 when these teams are undefeated or whatever? It's like, well, it's just harder because it's harder. It's like I just feel like there was too much like human error that could really depend on somebody's season being going to the national championship or going to the Rose Bowl versus going to the Music City Bowl. And I feel like this opens up the floor to being like, okay, Ohio State, you think you're still the best team in the country, even though you lost two games? Go prove it. And it's like they did prove it. They went and beat Tennessee double digits. They beat every team in the playoff run by double digits. So it's like they did revenge their losses. Now, I don't think they're a top 10 team in the last 20 years. I mean, top team in the last 20 years, but I feel like that's what it opens up. Is like it ends the debate of the discussion of like, well, we should have still went. It's like, well, you know, you did go and you lost. So I feel like as long as you don't lose more than two games and you're a big name program, I mean, you're in. I like it personally. I know you don't like it. I like it more just because you got to understand there were so many years to where the Big Ten, or not just the Big Ten, Ohio State got left out of the 4-team playoff. I hate to say it, but on some bullshit. I mean, we went to we would go to this game, towards the end of the season, and we would lose in the Big Ten championship game. But then Alabama wouldn't even play in their conference championship game, and they would still make it because it's like, well, they had the tougher schedule. It's like, so we have a better record than they do. So it's like I would say Ohio State got screwed a lot in the 4-team playoff, especially like the 2015 season. We lost to Virginia Tech, and then I don't think we lost again, or maybe we lost at the end of the season. We ended up getting held out of the conference, or not the conference, the 4-team playoff, and we were returning champions. But guess what? You didn't hear Ohio State bitching and complaining about not making the playoffs. Sorry, Mason. I just had to go on the tangent because it's like I think it's viewed from two different perspectives. Just for so long, the 4-team playoff, it was like you had two SEC teams in every time, and it was like, why are they in? It's like, oh, well, they're just playing in a harder conference. It's like, I mean, okay, if that's your argument. So I feel like it just opens it up for more conferences to get more of an opportunity to win.
I just think it only benefits the big teams. I don't
Yeah,
think it benefits Arkansas. I don't think it benefits Washington. I don't think it benefits I don't think it benefits Mississippi. I don't think it benefits Illinois or Indiana or any of that because if you have a dream season as an Arkansas fan and you go 11-1 and you beat someone big, well then you have to play them again, and that talent discrepancy is going to show up the second time. It just is, and I think that's kind of what happened with Oregon. Oregon had their dream season. Oregon's never going to be as talented as Ohio State. I don't think they are. Now there is years where they might be on a similar level, but they're never going to be more talented. And you saw that. Like Oregon won that big game. Oregon ran the table, and then Oregon had to play the toughest second round game you could ever imagine. They had to play the most talented team in college football. That was the whole storyline going into last year was is Ohio State just going to murder everybody because Ohio State had all this talent.
yeah,
Um,
and
and,
I
and I
think
just think it doesn't benefit middle tier programs at all. I don't think it benefits us at all.
And I think it does. I just think this year your middle tier programs, like you viewed them as like a flash in the pan. Like Tennessee, they were middle tier program. Indiana, middle tier program. Who's some other ones that made it that like, yeah, they might not have technically been like middle tier in your eyes, but like Who's the other SEC teams that made it? Like Texas lost to Georgia twice. I'm not saying they're middle tier, but like I feel like you're middle tier. You just have to be at the top of that middle tier. But like I think it gives more teams an option to like look forward and like, okay, we don't have to be at the top of our conference. We just have to be in the top 4 or top 5, and we have that option to make it. That's my
Yeah.
opinion, though. Instead of being like, oh, well, if you don't make it to the SEC championship game, you're not going to the playoffs. Now it's like, I mean, as long as you win, what would that be like? 7/8 of your games, or however you want to divide it up. Like, if you win that many of your games, like, what did Tennessee finish last year before they played Ohio State? They were 10-2.
Yeah, they lost to Georgia and Arkansas.
Arkansas, yeah. So like an SEC team goes 10-2, like they're in. So like instead of Arkansas saying like, "Damn man, we got to go undefeated or only have 2 losses or 1 loss," it's like, well, we can have 2 losses now. I feel like it does open it up. It's just like how is like you're not kind of like you said, like you're not just gonna jump and be like in the playoffs. I think what Arkansas needs to do. I know we're not technically an Arkansas show, but we're getting close enough to season where we're going to start talking about Arkansas. I think what Arkansas needs to do is fire their head coach and start over. I just that's my personal opinion. I think they need to get a defensive coach in there. Watching a lot of people don't know the SEC. What's the SEC new SEC game thing on Netflix?
Oh, Any Given Saturday.
Yeah, Any Given Saturday. I keep up with Ohio State, and there's some other programs that I keep up with, and I'm sure everybody does. Your Alabamas, your Georgias, and stuff like that. Like it just looks different. That's all I'm gonna say. It's not the same. It's like watching a high school program versus like the big dogs when it comes to like that. And I feel like the head coach has direct reflection on that. I know Arkansas is not some just piss poor program, but like if you go and look at practice footage of like them running around and like the media's in there, it just looks different going from Ohio State to like looking at Arkansas stuff. And I'm not talking about the athlete. I'm just talking about like the preparation in the practices.
Yeah, I could go for an hour on Arkansas, but I'm gonna withhold from that. This is our last show before we're really getting into it, so I think we might just end it here. I'd say it was a pretty good episode. We're gonna really hammer home. Starting pretty soon, we're gonna be doing 2 episodes a week, so make sure y'all subscribe. Make sure y'all follow us on everything. Turn on the bell notification. We are very, very, very close to college football.
Do we have any comments, Mason, or no?
We don't have any.
Okay, that's fine. I'd just like to check and make sure. Don't want people to feel like we're missing out on them.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I got. Thursday, 7:30, same time next week, we're going to be giving a prediction show. So, and we'll probably there's not a lot of predictions to do, so we might talk about something else. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. It'll be probably a prediction, and maybe like we'll give our top 10 or something.
Yeah, but all right, y'all have a good week or a good weekend. Try and be safe and get ready for college football. We're right here on the doorstep. Y'all have a good one. This was 3 Deep South. Goodbye. Oh, I did not stop it. Instead, I pressed the wrong button. Now